Tom, we got a lot going on today. Can I just ask you, first off, we heard this comment from Joe Biden, which is now, of course, sort of taken on a life of its own, this idea about Putin not being able to stay, should not remain in power. The administration has walked it back, but Biden's kind of not backing down at the same time. So what are we to make of this?
Biden's exact words were, I'm not walking anything back. He doesn't think that the guy deserves to be in power, and he shouldn't be in power. It reminded me more than anything else, Aaron, of the time that Ronald Reagan stood in front of the Berlin Wall and sent out an invocation to Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, take down this wall. And it's the same sort of idea. He said nice things, by the way, during his speeches about the Russian people, that what's happening isn't a reflection of them. And, it's the same thing. He was just saying this guy is unworthy. He shouldn't be there. And he wasn't calling for a regime change. He wasn't asking anybody to put a bullet in the guy's head. He was just saying this guy doesn't deserve to be in office. He shouldn't be there. And I think it was a perfectly reasonable thing to say, given everything that's gone on.
But why is it considered to be so inflammatory then? Is it just all about escalation?
Well, because they've been blowing on the embers of it. I mean, Emmanuel Macron was the first out of the starting blocks to start tutting Biden, but he's got an election coming up for the presidency of France in the next couple of weeks. So I guess you can take that with a certain grain of salt. Around the world, I mean, it's a question of timing. It's also a question of tone, and it's a question of how people are hearing it. But I think that Biden was absolutely right to say there's no reason for a guy like this doing this sort of thing to remain in office. And it's such a no-brainer for me. I can't believe that it has provoked such a reaction.
All right. The other thing I did want to ask today, and I know, Tom, you're probably still around in power when this was actually going on, Canada's decision to now go ahead and buy those 35 F-35 jets from Lockheed Martin. By the time we get these things, there'll probably be new technology out. Why are we doing this now?
Because, like usual, we're 30 years behind.
Oh, okay.
We had the F-18s. The CF-18 was a decent fighter jet still, for many years. It did good service, and it's been used any number of times, especially in Libya. Then all of a sudden we were with the Conservatives, and they were saying they wanted the F-35, and the Liberals were saying, oh, no, not that. Let's go for the Super Hornet, the Super F-18s, or something like that. So out of nowhere, we stalled through the whole time that the Conservatives were in power. All that the Liberals under Trudeau have been able to do, it sounds like I'm making this up, but they actually bought junkyard F-18s from the Australians, who were sending them to the scrapyard because they had been smart and gotten first in line, and they had ordered F-35s, which they're now using. So we bought their jalopies. We bought their tacos. So those are what we're still flying now. The F-35, you're completely right. By the time we get ours, which will be years and years from now, and count on our procurement people to start coming up with specific little requests that delay everything and double the price. We'll have these things, but they'll completely be out of date by then. But Canada has an abysmal track record when it comes to buying anything. It took us decades to get new helicopters. We've got 24 of them. 23 of them have cracks in the fuselage. That was just recently revealed. And now we're flying old F-18s, some of our own, some from Australia. And good, that we're going to finally order something. But one of the problems with the F-35 since the beginning is, unlike the Super Hornet or the Hornet, which has two engines, this thing has only one engine. I don't know if you'd like your kid, your son or daughter, to be flying over the Arctic on a single-engine aircraft. Just saying.
Yeah, well, no. I mean, I guess that's fair, except I'm trying to understand why is this happening now, Tom, I guess is part of my question here. Like, why all of a sudden did this change now? Is it something to do with Ukraine? Talk about defense spending increases? Why?
Well, exactly the second part, because then Trudeau gets to say, well, let's start building this into our defense spending estimates, and we're going to become overnight a lot closer to the 2% norm that NATO has been saying, and we're one of the cheapest players in NATO. I mean, we're at 1.4%, 1.3, 1.4%, and most of the other countries, the Americans, are at 3.5%. The French and other countries in Europe, they're all meeting the 2% requirement, 2% of gross domestic product.
Right.
So with your mention of Trudeau there, it just made me think how I was a total and complete sucker today during the press conference where he was getting all cozy with Ford and whatnot. Meanwhile, he took Minister Ahmed Hussein's baby and held on to the baby for a minute during the press conference. And I thought that gets every time.
That's right, Tom. And that bought Natasha's vote, just so you know.
It's so pathetic, though. I couldn't believe how effective it was. I went instantly Goo Gaga. It didn't matter whatever he was talking about. I'm like, where do I sign up to vote and give you money? This old thing, kissing babies, works.
And, don't want to be sounding like this is sour grapes, but they essentially are finishing off the announcement of the NDP program for childcare that we proposed in the 2015 campaign. And I have a very distinct memory of Kathleen Weil sending out her education minister to help Justin Trudeau and attack our child care program, which is exactly the one that Justin Trudeau is putting in place. I'm very glad it's being put in place, and every province deserves to have what we've had in Quebec for 25 years. But it is quite amazing to see how times change. By the way, Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau, what a lovely couple. And, if I was if I was Stephen Del Duca, the head of the Liberals in Ontario, I'd be losing it right now.
But we should tell people, just for context, so we're talking about the fact that, they're getting $10 a day daycare now in Ontario to match what we basically have in Quebec, right? That's the bottom line.
Exactly.
Okay.
But Mr. Trudeau's been doing a good job. He's been signing individual deals with the provinces, and because Quebec is already paying for the whole system and it's up and running, they're going to write a small check for $6 billion to Quebec. So, good stuff.
Okay. And then to think, I'm so jaded, I'm so fed up with everything that Trudeau has to say or does these days. And then in just that moment, I was I'm like, because he was smart enough to take the baby and hold it and rock it, and it completely changed the perspective. Anyway, moving on. Something I feel like we are...
He does that a lot with kids, and he's got quite a touch, quite a knack for dealing with kids in events like that. By the way, since you're following this so closely, and we're just fresh off the NDP Liberal deal, keep your eyes on an announcement in the next couple of days from Steven Guilbeault. There was a hard and fast promise from the Liberals during the last campaign that there would be a hard cap, an absolute maximum of greenhouse gases produced by the oil and gas sector. I am reasonably informed that they're not going to respect that promise. But there's something even worse coming up from an environmental perspective. There's this massive offshore petroleum project called Bay du Nord that is off Newfoundland and Labrador, massive $15 billion project, Norwegian money. Lots of greenhouse gases, but they're going to say it's not quite as bad as tar sands oil, so let's have lots of it. This will break, of course, any chance of Canada ever meeting its international obligations. And if you look at the deal between the NDP and the Liberals, there's nothing about meeting our international obligations. It's all, we're going to continue to have progress towards elaborating a plan to perhaps, so you'll understand when you see what the Liberals announce in the next couple of weeks, that as usual, we're the last in the class, because right now, since the signing of the Paris Accord in 2015, Canada's had the worst record in the G7.
Yeah, you said that. I'm just wondering if that's in fact the case, and that's the announcement we get. How's Jagmeet Singh going to explain that away?
He's not going to be able to, because it was one of the few things that he scored on. And by the way, don't take my word for it. Canada's Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development confirmed after the election, because he didn't want to get involved during the election, that had become a big issue, whether or not we had the worst record. And he confirmed, we've got the worst record in the G7.
Look,
I feel bad for Steven Guilbeault having to make those kinds of announcements.
I think he's gonna be under a lot of pressure to resign, because a lot of people who helped put him there, true believers from the environmental field, really like this guy, as I do. I really I've got nothing but good things to say about him. But if he sits around the cabinet table and approves this massive new offshore oil project, good luck trying to explain that one away. When he arrived and Trudeau had already bought a pipeline, that was one thing. He got to say, that's part of history. Let's move on. But this one's going to be on him, so we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Tom, I was going to ask you about Alison Haynes' column today in the Gazette.
What a great article.
What a great article. What a terrible thing at the same time to consider the screws are tightening one after the other after the other.
This is on
but
Bill
we've
96.
talked about it at one turn of the screws every step of the way.
Yeah.
We've talked about all of the horrible things that François Legault, and especially his acolyte.
Henchman,
his henchman. What a great word that is. That's exactly right. Simon Jardin Barrette. I mean, they've been intentionally targeting the English-speaking community. They want to get a rise out of the community. They want them to react, and they're keeping their fingers crossed that Dominique Anglade is actually going to try to come against Bill 96, which she's already announced that she will, by the way. So I think that Legault is playing the nastiest type of identity politics I have ever seen in my career, and I've been dealing with this language stuff for decades and decades, but he's much worse than anybody I've ever seen, because it's being done very viciously, and it's being done with intent, and all you have to do is a complete tracking of everything they've done every step of the way. I was listening to the young student that you had on just before, trying to describe why it makes such a big difference if you're telling somebody who's studying science and is hoping to get top marks to get into med school, say, but all of a sudden they've got to do their chemistry and their calculus and their physics, let's say. in French, well, it completely changes what type of marks they're going to get. And that's why this thing should have been thought through. I still can't believe that David Birnbaum is the one who brought it forward for the Liberals. I still haven't heard any justification for what he did there that night.
Yeah, the only thing I ever got from him or from Hélène David, I guess, was the fact that they were suggesting these be optional courses, not mandatory courses. I think that's their out on this, Tom.
Well, you're going to have to go back to what they said, because none of that, there was no question of optional. It was within their area of study.
Well, there we go. That's where we are right now. We've had him on. We have to try to get him on again. I guess it's worth doing now, because more people are beginning to understand this is just a giant, I would call it a pain, but a giant sort of roadblock for students who just want to pursue their education here, not have to worry about language as opposed to what it is they're trying to study.
Because it doesn't change anything. Those kids are already bilingual. They come out of high school, they're bilingual. They live in Quebec, they're bilingual. What it's going to mean is that they'll have trouble getting into the profession that they wanted to get into. Yeah. By the way, the minute you start your training in a professional setting in Quebec, any of the little terms and the little twists and turns of phrase that you need, the professional jargon and all the specialized vocabulary, that comes right away. But they're not going to give you that chance, because you're not going to make it into med school if you have to do so many of your courses in French, and it'll affect your marks.
Tom Mulcair. Tom, thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Good to talk to you.